This is A Deeper Listen, the show where we talk with musicians about the thoughts and experiences that shape their music. And today, we're talking with the Seattle-raised and Oakland-based musician Kashika Kollaikal, who goes by the name Flung. KEXP's Isabel Khalili has this conversation.
Kashika Kollaikal's third album under the artist name Flung is called All Heartbeat. And though there's a steady confidence in the way she moves, there's also a feeling of impermanence, almost restlessness. She rarely takes root in one sound for long.
I go forever, I go forever, I go forever, I go forever.
1 minute she'll be singing a melody that somehow evokes nostalgia while feeling completely new.
Did you go in the winter? Did you go?
And the next, you'll be dropped from new agey synths to a wobbly techno beat. Flung also takes inspiration from her physical environment. By paying attention to the world around her, she says she finds music everywhere, like in a distant rainstorm, or a squawking bird. There's something intuitive and natural about the way she shifts from one sound to the next. It's the result of really listening, because these shifts are happening around us all the time. In my conversation with Kashika, we talked about her practice of slowing down, how she brings field recordings onto the record, and what inspired her to make her own music box. But first, we talked about her mother's harmonium and how it became the central hum of the record because of one night in a Seattle airport. I understand that this album has its origins in a night at SeaTac Airport in Seattle. Can you talk about that night and how it inspired the record?
So I made this record over the course of 2022, and I started in late 2021. I was in Seattle visiting my parents for the holidays, and my mom has this harmonium that she's had ever since she was pregnant with me in Varanasi in India. On this trip, I found myself super drawn to it, and I would just sit and play it. And, you know, for folks who might not know, it's like a harmonium is this wooden box, and there's a keyboard, and you play on the keyboard with your right hand. Then you use your left hand to pump air through these bellows. And you're pumping air through it, and it felt like breathing. There was something that was so powerful for me and helped me slow down and orient in space, and I just felt this deep connection with the instrument. And so I decided to take the harmonium back to the Bay with me. I cleared it with my mom. She was happy about it. So I'm at SeaTac. I'm flying home. It's New Year's Day. It's freezing cold. I have the harmonium slung like over my shoulder. I don't have a case for it or anything. It's like very fragile. It's this very old instrument. And my flight was supposed to take off, I don't know, at like 6 or 7 at night, and it kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed, and finally it got canceled, and I wasn't able to be rebooked until the next morning. So I ended up spending the night at the gate, just on the airport floor with this harmonium, and there was something that felt very like intimate about it, and I felt like I really connected to the instrument, and it almost felt bonding. Like I was like, oh, I'm getting to know this instrument. And I got home the next morning and immediately sat up on the floor, and this big like whoosh of inspiration just like poured through me, and I created like the first initial batch of demos for what became this record, All Heartbeat.
Thinking more about the harmonium, I love the way you talk about it as like breathing And you've also described the album's central ethos as listening for the hum of the world. And I wondered if you could elaborate on that.
I feel like the world is made of all of these tiny little sounds, and they're everywhere. They're all around us. And I think so often we're just kind of used to missing them or filtering them, tuning them out. And sometimes that's important. It's not like there's no purpose for that. But for me, there's something very powerful about developing a greater sense of sensitivity to everything that is surrounding us. It's a way to tune in more deeply. And I think for me, thinking about these little sounds, and that might be the hum of my neighbor's air conditioning unit, or standing in one particular spot and hearing a bird on my right and a bird on my left, and hearing kind of a polyrhythm between how their calls are interacting, or hearing the kind of roar of a crowd of people on the soccer field across from my house when someone scores a goal. There's all these little sounds, and for me, tuning into them helps me see this possibility that there could be music everywhere. And for me, what that means is there could be beauty everywhere. There could be awe everywhere. And I think there's also a way in which it really helps me to orient in the places that I move through. So a lot of this record, on All Heartbeat, I was focusing on found sounds from my neighborhood. And I would go on these walks, because I mostly record from home. And I would go on these walks, these recording breaks, and just listen to the sounds that were happening, and also be quiet enough to be able to listen, right? I feel sometimes if we're always talking or always filling our ears with some other, and I love to listen to music too when I'm walking or whatnot, but if that's all we're doing, then there's a lot that we miss, that we're being too loud, or we're filling our ears with too many other things to listen to the quiet sounds that might be missed. So on these walks around my neighborhood, I think there was something, it helped me feel like I understood my neighborhood in a different way. And I think listening for me helps me understand any space. To me, that is a way to inhabit the world, I guess, or inhabit the spaces or the communities that I'm in a way that feels sensitive and responsive, and like how I want to be moving.
In thinking about being tuned into your environment and responding to it, I know there's a lot of field recording, found sound in the record, and I wonder if you could talk us through some of that, or what are some of the experiences you had out in the world when you were paying attention and taking in your environment, where that made it onto the record, and can you share how that happened?
So you might have noticed there are these sounds, sounds like a child's music box throughout the record. And in fact, those are music boxes. And particularly on the title track, All Heartbeat, there's this melody that is played on a music box.
1 million miles away, miles away. 1 million miles away, 1 million miles away.
The story of the music box is that I was at this incredible building called Chapel of the Chimes, which is a columbarium. It's designed by Julia Morgan. It's in Oakland. It's one of the most beautiful buildings I've ever been in. And it's like a total maze. You could wander in there for hours and hours and hours. There's these rooms that connect to other rooms. A lot of it is open air. It's gorgeous. Once a year on the solstice, they do an experimental music festival where they have like 40 different performers of all kinds of genres, many playing experimental instruments, all throughout this space. And you just kind of wander and walk freely between the different things. You can stay as long as you want. And the whole thing goes for like 4 hours, and it's incredible. And this is still one of the best nights of my life. It was my first time in that building, and I went by myself, and it was so special. And at sunset, at the end of the night, I'm on my way out. Everyone's leaving. The sun's setting. It's this open air space. It's incredible. And I hear this tiny little sound. And I walk towards it, and I see this guy with these music boxes and these long, like, scrolls of paper that he's feeding through the music boxes. And he's turning a crank. I was so transfixed. I sat on the floor. I put my ear up so I could get as close as possible because it was such a quiet sound, and there were all these other sounds happening of, people leaving and clanging and the other, performances. And it was so moving to me. His name is Sid Chen, and he has started this actually during the pandemic. I talked to him afterwards, and I've gone back every year since. And basically how you use these music boxes is you punch out every note individually with this tiny little hole puncher, dot by dot by dot by dot. Every note you have to punch by hand. There's no real easy shortcut. And it's such an exercise of patience. And so anyway, I went home and immediately ordered a music box kit and ended up incorporating it into the record. Another sound on this record that I really love is on the first track, Baby I Hope. About halfway through, before there's kind of a drop where there's this slice of silence. And right before that, there's this big crescendo. The story of that crescendo is I was finishing this album in the woods. It was maybe November 2022. I went to this cabin and spent about a week there. And I was walking around in the redwoods at sunset in this redwood forest. And it was my favorite time of day when it's getting dark and my eyes are kind of adjusting. And I stepped into this redwood tree, where they have these like giant kind of cavities in the center. And I was just standing in this tree, and I hear this sound that sounded so melodic. At first I thought someone was playing music or something, but it was just this kind of droning tone, and it was getting louder and louder. So I immediately pull out my phone and start recording it. And it was just, it was so beautiful. It made me want to cry. And I ran back to the cabin afterwards and realized it actually was fit perfectly into the last song that I was working on for the album, which was the first song, Baby I Hope, that I had been struggling with for months and months and months and months. And the crescendo of it was just this perfect, and I should say what it was. It was, it was a vehicle. It was like a Park Service vehicle that was driving closer and closer, and then until it was right where I was. And I was like, oh, that's not magic. That's an automobile. But it was magic in that way. It almost felt like it just leapt into the song.
Yeah. Oh, that's...
Because it was in the same key, too.
Wow. I understand that a lot of the inspiration for this album was in your environment and the sounds you're encountering on a day-to-day basis, just as a person living in the world. but I'm wondering if there were any other artists or particular pieces of art. I know you've already talked about the music box and how that kind of worked, how you worked that into the music, but are there other inspirations that you held on to throughout the making of this record?
A big one for me is the writer Ross Gay, and he has a book. Yeah, he's so amazing.
Makes total
he has a
sense.
book. Yeah, I've read like everything he's done, but specifically Book of Delights. He has this book where he has this practice, a year of his life, where he's writing every day. He writes a delight, and it's just this tiny little bite-sized meditation on things that are as everyday as carrying a tomato plant through the airport, or the joy of nicknaming your loved ones, or weird signs or something. And I think that's been so helpful the last couple of years for me in that practice of slowing down and noticing these tiny little things. And I've actually started a delights list that helps me ground that in my own life too. So that's a big one. I would say musically, two for this record that were very inspiring to me. I mean, there's so many, but one is Nala Sinefro, and
we speak the same language.
Yeah. Her record Space 1.8 was so helpful for me. I remember I heard there's an interview she did where she talked about getting into the state where she can play the same note for 10 minutes straight and just play that note and like sit in it and hear different things in it each time. And for me, that's, there's something so powerful about that space and way of sitting still, but not totally still, or not stagnant. And then the other one I'll lift up is someone, kind of acquaintance of mine who I played a show with, who released a record in 2022 when I was working on this album, Kaina. Her album, It Was a Home.
I used to live in a little room in the middle house with a crooked view.
That's just such a beautiful record. There's so much sweetness and love, and she's just so unabashed about sweetness and love and family and connecting with the places that, have shaped us throughout our lives and different versions of ourselves, and how she talks about that record too.
But it was a home, not a hill.
But yeah, our final question is, we like to ask artists to put us onto other artists we might like. This chain of music discovery is really at the heart of what KEXP does. So what song would you recommend to our listeners today?
Today, I would recommend the song Horizon by Brianna Morella. It's from her album Teardrop Star that just came out recently.
Trying to get yourself set in motion, 'cause you've been sitting there for so long. Hesitation to leave this city, that you could always come back,
She's an artist. She lives in the Bay now. We know each other a bit, but she spent many, many years in Seattle as well, and in Olympia and in the Pacific Northwest. And this song is from this album she just released. She initially made it, I believe, in 2018, and various things happened and she didn't end up releasing it then, and did a self-release now. And there's just something I find very beautiful about that project of looking back on previous versions of yourself and being in relationship to those other versions. And the song is just so beautiful. It's that perfect blend of like super catchy and like anthemic in a way, but also like deeply sad, but also deeply hopeful.
Yeah.
It's
All
like,
of those
yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Can't believe the dark bed. Can't believe it. See what comes to. Can't we see what comes to? The things on the horizon for you. Can't we see what comes to? The things on the horizon for you. Can't we see what comes to? The things on the horizon for you. Can't we see what comes to? The things on the horizon for you.
Okay, Kashika, thank you so much for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I wish we could keep talking, honestly.
Me too. Thank you, Isabel.
Yeah,
This was
thank
lovely.
you.
That was the Seattle-raised, Oakland-based musician Kashika Kollaikal, who goes by the name Flung.
I go forever, I go forever, I go forever, I go forever. Did you go in the winter? Did you go? Did you go? Did you go in the winter? Did you go?
And that was A Deeper Listen. Before you go, please subscribe to this podcast, rate it, and review it. It really goes a long way in helping spread the word that this podcast exists, is out there, is worthy of other people's time. We don't want to rely on big advertising dollars because KEXP is a publicly funded station. The majority of our funding comes from listeners, so word of mouth goes a long way, and so does your financial support. Think about giving $6 a month to support what we do on A Deeper Listen. You can give at kexp.org/deeper. And thanks for taking a deeper listen.